crystal chandeliers of the royal palace cast a warm glow across the grand ballroom, scattering light over polished marble floors and glittering jewels. Music drifted through the air, while nobles from every corner of the kingdom gathered to celebrate the engagement of Duke Adrian and Lady Charlotte. Charlotte stood near the entrance, her silver gown flowing gracefully around her as she surveyed the crowd. Conversations paused whenever she passed. Admirers complimented her elegance, and older nobles smiled approvingly. Yet despite the attention, her gaze searched only for one person, Adrian. The Duke stood across the room, surrounded by influential lords and military officers. Tall and striking, he carried himself with effortless authority. Few men commanded a room as naturally as he did. His dark attire contrasted sharply with the gold decorations surrounding him, making him impossible to overlook. For years, Charlotte had loved him. Their engagement had not been born from obligation alone. She had believed it was founded on mutual affection, even if Adrian rarely expressed his feelings openly. He had always been reserved, a man who guarded his emotions behind walls of discipline and pride. She accepted that part of him because she thought she understood him. When his father had died unexpectedly 3 years earlier, leaving him burdened with enormous responsibilities, she had remained by his side. During political disputes that threatened his reputation, she defended him when others whispered against him. Whenever doubt clouded his judgment, she offered encouragement. She never demanded recognition. She simply loved him. Their eyes met briefly across the ballroom. Charlotte offered a gentle smile. Adrian nodded politely before returning to his conversation. The small gesture stung more than she cared to admit. As the evening progressed, she noticed the growing distance between them. Other engaged couples danced together and exchanged affectionate glances, but Adrian remained occupied with influential guests, barely speaking to her beyond formal pleasantries. Still, Charlotte refused to let disappointment ruin the celebration. She moved through the crowd with dignity, greeting guests and fulfilling her duties as the future Duchess. Her natural kindness earned admiration wherever she went. Servants smiled when she thanked them, elderly nobles praised her manners, and younger ladies sought her advice. Yet beneath her composed exterior, uncertainty quietly grew. Later in the evening, she stepped onto a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The night air felt refreshing after the crowded ballroom. Moonlight illuminated the pathways below, and the distant sound of fountains created a soothing rhythm. For a few moments she allowed herself to breathe. Then voices drifted through an open doorway nearby. She recognized Adrian immediately. Instinctively, she remained still. The men speaking with him were members of several powerful noble families, their reputations for arrogance well known throughout court. One of them laughed. "Adrian, you truly astonish me. With your status, you could have chosen almost anyone in the kingdom." Another joined in, a princess perhaps, or the daughter of a great duke. "Yet you chose Lady Charlotte." Their laughter echoed through the corridor. Charlotte frowned. Her family was respectable and honorable, though not as wealthy or influential as Adrian's. She had never considered that a flaw. A third man lowered his voice. "Surely people must question your decision." For several seconds, silence followed. Charlotte waited, expecting Adrian to defend her. Instead, she heard a quiet chuckle. Then came the words that shattered her world. "Honestly," Adrian said, "I'm embarrassed to marry her." The sentence struck like a blade, driven directly into her heart. Everything around her seemed to disappear, the music, the laughter, the fountain, the entire palace. Only those words remained. "Times, I'm embarrassed to marry her." She stood frozen as the men laughed again. One remarked that at least Adrian was being truthful. Another congratulated him for admitting what everyone supposedly thought. Charlotte could barely hear them. Pain flooded through her chest so suddenly that it stole her breath. For years she had devoted herself to him without hesitation. She had believed her loyalty mattered and that her love was valued. Yet in a single careless moment, Adrian had revealed how little respect he truly had for her. A movement near the doorway caught his attention. His gaze shifted, and for the first time he saw her standing there. Their eyes locked. The amusement vanished from his expression instantly. Charlotte saw recognition then, shock, then guilt. Neither spoke. The silence between them felt unbearable. Adrian took a step forward, but she turned away before he could continue. Every ounce of dignity she possessed became her shield. She would not cry in front of those men, nor would she allow them to witness her humiliation. With measured steps, she returned to the ballroom. No one seemed aware that her heart had just broken. She smiled when spoken to, accepted congratulations, and even danced once with an elderly count who requested the honor. Throughout it all, she felt strangely detached from herself, as though watching another woman perform her role. Across the room, Adrian repeatedly attempted to approach her, but each time circumstances prevented him, or perhaps he lacked the courage. By midnight, the celebration finally ended. Charlotte returned to her chamber inside the palace. The moment the door closed behind her, the strength she had maintained all evening began to crumble. She sat beside the window and stared into the darkness. Memories surfaced one after another. She remembered comforting Adrian after his father's funeral. She remembered defending him during political attacks, and she remembered believing in him when others doubted him. Not once had she asked for anything beyond honesty and respect. Yet those had been the very things denied to her. Tears finally escaped, not loud dramatic sobs, just silent tears that rolled down her cheeks while the reality settled into her heart. The man she intended to marry was ashamed of her. No explanation could erase that truth. Hours passed. The palace slept. A faint glow appeared on the horizon as dawn slowly approached. By then, Charlotte had reached a decision. Love without respect could never survive. No matter how deeply she cared for Adrian, she refused to spend her life beside someone embarrassed by her existence. She crossed the room and sat at her writing desk. Taking a sheet of parchment, she carefully composed a letter, her hand trembling only once. When she finished, she read the words again. She released Adrian from their engagement, wished him happiness, and promised she would never force herself into the life of a man who did not value her. After folding the letter, she placed it where he would find it. Then she packed only what she needed. No servants were awakened, and no announcements were made. The palace remained silent as the first rays of morning touched the kingdom. A carriage rolled away from the estate and disappeared down the distant road. Inside sat Lady Charlotte. She did not look back. Several hours later, Duke Adrian entered her chamber. At first he expected another difficult conversation. Instead, he found an empty room, an untouched bed missing belongings, and the letter waiting on the desk. As he read her farewell, a cold dread spread through him, unlike anything he had ever experienced. For the first time in years, the powerful Duke felt utterly helpless, and for the first time he realized that Charlotte might truly be gone. Duke Adrian read the farewell letter so many times that the folds in the parchment began to weaken. Every sentence seemed sharper than the last. The words were polite, restrained, and painfully dignified. She had not insulted him. She had not accused him. She had simply walked away. For some reason, that hurt more. 3 days had passed since her disappearance, yet Adrian remained convinced she would return. Charlotte was sensible and thoughtful. Surely she only needed time to cool her emotions. That belief crumbled when a full week passed without a single message. No letter arrived, no servant reported seeing her, and no friend knew her location. The realization settled over him with increasing weight. She was truly gone. The vast estate suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every corridor reminded him of her presence, and every garden path carried memories he had never appreciated while she was there. He found himself pausing outside the library where she often read in the afternoons. He lingered near the greenhouse she had restored after a winter storm damaged it. Even the dining hall seemed emptier than before. Only after losing her did he understand how completely she had woven herself into his life. One evening he sat alone in his study, staring at the farewell letter spread across his desk. His eyes settled on a single line, "I will never force myself into the life of a man who does not value me." The sentence struck him harder than any political attack or battlefield wound ever could, because it was true. Not that he failed to value her. The truth was worse. He valued her so deeply that he had become afraid of it. For years, Adrian had carefully maintained an image of strength. Powerful men respected him because he appeared untouchable. Rivals hesitated because he rarely revealed emotion. Then Charlotte entered his life. Without realizing it, she became the one person capable of affecting him more than anyone else. The vulnerability frightened him, so he concealed it. He buried affection beneath formality, hid gratitude behind silence, and when his arrogant friends mocked his engagement, he chose pride instead of loyalty. One careless sentence had cost him the woman he loved. The realization left him unable to sleep. At dawn the following morning, he made a decision. He would find her not through servants, not through hired investigators, but himself. For the first time in years, Adrian abandoned his usual schedule. Court meetings were postponed, estate matters were delegated, and political obligations became secondary. Finding Charlotte became his only priority. His search began in nearby villages. He visited inns, marketplaces, and coaching stations, showing sketches and descriptions to merchants and travelers. Most shook their heads. A few believed they had seen someone similar, but each lead ended in disappointment. Days turned into weeks. The journey carried him farther from the capital than he had traveled in years. Along dusty roads and quiet towns, Adrian encountered people whose lives differed greatly from those of the nobles who dominated court society. One afternoon, he stopped at a small roadside inn. An elderly couple managed the establishment together. While waiting for information, Adrian observed them moving through their daily routine. The husband struggled to carry heavy supplies due to age. Without being asked, his wife helped him. When she became tired, he immediately noticed and insisted she rest. Their gestures were small but sincere. There was no performance, no pride, only partnership. The sight lingered in Adrian's thoughts long after he departed. Further along his journey, he met a farmer whose wife was recovering from illness. The man spent every spare moment caring for her despite the burden it placed on his work. When Adrian asked why he pushed himself so hard, the farmer appeared genuinely confused. "Because she's my wife," he replied simply. "If she suffers, I suffer too." The answer haunted Adrian. How many times had Charlotte suffered silently because of him? How many moments had he overlooked because he assumed she would always remain beside him? The farther he traveled, the more his understanding deepened. Love was not proven through grand declarations. It was proven through respect, through loyalty, through choosing a partner's dignity over one's own pride. And he had failed that test completely. Nearly a month after her disappearance, Adrian arrived at a coastal town after receiving a promising rumor. A merchant claimed a noblewoman matching her description had been seen helping at a local clinic. Hope surged through him. For the first time in weeks, the lead felt real. He searched every street, every inn, and every public building. By sunset, he learned the rumor referred to another woman entirely. The disappointment was crushing. Standing near the harbor, Adrian stared across the calm water. For a brief moment, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. What if she never wanted to be found? The possibility terrified him, yet surrender was impossible, not after everything he had finally come to understand. He resumed his search the next morning. Another week passed, then another. The kingdom gradually transformed from a map of territories into a collection of memories connected by hope and regret. Each village represented another chance, and each road carried another possibility. Then, nearly 7 weeks after Charlotte left, fate finally rewarded his persistence. In a modest town surrounded by rolling hills, Adrian stopped at a bakery to ask his familiar question. The elderly owner listened carefully, then she nodded. "There is a young woman here who arrived several weeks ago," she said. "She's educated, kind, and helps anyone who needs assistance." Adrian's pulse quickened. "What does she look like?" The description matched perfectly. For a moment, he could barely breathe. After weeks of uncertainty, he finally had something real. The baker directed him toward a charitable center near the edge of town. Adrian crossed the streets with growing urgency. As he approached the building, he noticed children laughing in a nearby courtyard. Several women organized supplies for struggling families. The atmosphere felt warm and welcoming. Then he saw her. Charlotte stood beneath a flowering tree speaking with an elderly widow. Sunlight illuminated strands of her silver hair stirred gently by the breeze. She looked peaceful, healthier than he expected, and stronger. For several seconds, Adrian simply stared. The sight overwhelmed him. Countless sleepless nights, countless miles traveled, countless regrets, all of them led to this moment. As if sensing his presence, Charlotte turned. Their eyes met. Shock flashed across her face, then caution replaced it. The widow beside her quietly excused herself and walked away. Neither moved, neither spoke. The distance between them felt far greater than the few yards separating them. Finally, Adrian stepped forward. Her expression remained calm, far calmer than his own. "What are you doing here?" she asked. The question carried no anger, but that somehow hurt more. "I've been searching for you," Adrian replied. A faint sadness crossed her features. For 7 weeks, yes. She studied him carefully. The confident duke who once commanded every room now appeared exhausted. Dust marked his coat and shadows lingered beneath his eyes. The journey had clearly taken its toll, yet she did not soften immediately. Pain had taught her caution. "You found me," she said quietly. "I did." Silence followed. The sounds of the town continued around them, but Adrian barely noticed. "What matters at last?" she spoke again, her voice remaining steady. "You told your friends you were embarrassed to marry me." The words landed with devastating force. Adrian lowered his gaze. There was no defense, no excuse, only shame. Charlotte sighed, a tear glistening briefly before she mastered her emotions. "Why are you here now?" she asked. For the first time since finding her, Adrian discovered he had no immediate answer. It was not because he lacked one, but because no explanation seemed large enough to contain everything he felt: the regret, the guilt, the love he had hidden for years. He opened his mouth, searching for words worthy of the truth. Charlotte waited, and for the first time since their paths crossed again, Adrian understood that finding her had been the easy part. Convincing her to trust him again would be the real battle. Adrian stood beneath the flowering tree and looked into her eyes, understanding that every mile he had traveled meant nothing if she refused to believe him. The silence between them carried the weight of 7 painful weeks. He wanted to explain everything at once, but years of restrained emotion had left him struggling to find the right words. He said quietly, "I was wrong." She studied him without speaking. The simplicity of his admission surprised her. The Duke Adrian she had known rarely acknowledged mistakes. Pride had always shielded him from vulnerability. Yet the man standing before her seemed different, older somehow, not in age but in understanding. Still, pain could not disappear simply because he regretted causing it. "You were wrong," she replied, "but that doesn't change what happened." "No," Adrian agreed, "it doesn't." For a moment she looked away. The breeze stirred the branches overhead, while distant laughter drifted from the courtyard. This town had become her refuge. Here people valued actions more than titles, and they judged character rather than status. For the first time in years, she had built a life untouched by court expectations. Returning to Adrian would mean risking her heart again, and she was no longer willing to do that blindly. "What do you want from me?" she asked. His answer came immediately: "A chance." The sincerity in his voice unsettled her, yet sincerity alone could not repair broken trust. She folded her hands and met his gaze again. "I gave you years of chances. Every word was true." Adrian accepted the blow without protest. "You did, and you embarrassed me in front of people who already looked down on me." His chest tightened. The memory remained unbearable. "I know." Charlotte waited for excuses, but none came, only accountability. For the first time, Adrian understood that explanations could easily become attempts to escape responsibility. He refused to dishonor her further by doing that. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, "but I couldn't leave without trying." The honesty caught her off guard. Before she could respond, several children rushed into her guard, carrying baskets of supplies. Their cheerful energy interrupted the conversation. Charlotte immediately turned to help them organize donations. Adrian watched her move among them. Every child greeted her with affection, and every volunteer respected her. She had created something meaningful during her absence, not because she possessed noble status, but because she genuinely cared. The realization deepened his admiration. Without invitation, he joined the work. At first, the volunteers regarded him with suspicion. A duke appearing in their small town was unusual enough, and following Charlotte around made it even stranger. Yet Adrian ignored the curious looks. He carried boxes, distributed food, helped repair damaged furniture, and performed whatever task needed attention. Days passed, then a week. Charlotte expected him to leave, but he remained. Not once did he pressure her. Not once did he demand a decision. Instead, he quietly worked beside everyone else. Gradually, the town began to see beyond his title, and more importantly, Charlotte did as well. One afternoon, she found him repairing a broken fence beneath the summer sun. His hands were scratched and his clothing was dusty. The sight felt strangely surreal. "The Duke repairs fences now?" she asked. A faint smile touched his lips. "The Duke is trying to become a better man." Something warm stirred inside her despite herself, but she quickly suppressed it. Affection was dangerous, especially when trust remained fragile. Another week passed. The distance between them slowly narrowed. They shared conversations during evening walks, spoke about the town, and discussed books they once enjoyed together. Occasionally they even laughed. Yet neither addressed the deeper emotions lingering beneath the surface. Then everything changed. A group of visiting nobles arrived in town while traveling between estates. Among them were 2 men who had attended the engagement celebration months earlier, the same men who had laughed when Adrian humiliated Charlotte. Recognition flashed across their faces when they saw her. One exchanged an amused glance with the other, their arrogance remaining unchanged. That evening they encountered Charlotte in the town square. Several residents stood nearby, and Adrian was only a short distance away. One noble smirked, "Lady Charlotte, imagine finding you here." The second laughed. "We assumed you vanished after realizing you could never truly belong among the highest circles." The insult drew immediate attention from everyone within earshot. Old wounds reopened instantly. For one terrible moment, Charlotte felt transported back to the palace balcony, back to the humiliation, back to the heartbreak. The first noble continued, though perhaps this simple town suits you better than a duchess's title. Before Charlotte could respond, a familiar voice cut through the square. Enough. The single word carried unmistakable authority. Adrian stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. The nobles appeared uncomfortable for the first time. One attempted an awkward laugh. "Your Grace, we meant no offense. Then choose your words more carefully." His tone remained calm, but the warning beneath it was unmistakable. The men exchanged nervous glances. Adrian moved to stand beside Charlotte, not behind her, but beside her as an equal. Then he looked directly at the gathered crowd. "I once allowed people to disrespect this woman." Charlotte stared at him in surprise. "So today I will correct that mistake." The square became completely silent. Adrian drew a slow breath. "The only thing I am embarrassed about is how I treated the woman I love." Shock spread across every face, including Charlotte's. The confession echoed through the square, clear, unwavering, and public. It was exactly the opposite of the cruel statement that had destroyed their engagement. Adrian continued, "Lady Charlotte is one of the strongest people I have ever known. She is compassionate, intelligent, loyal, and courageous." His eyes never left hers. "When my life was at its worst, she stood beside me." Emotion roughened his voice. When everyone else cared about appearances, she cared about people. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, but Adrian ignored them. "I spent years taking her loyalty for granted. I convinced myself she would always remain no matter how poorly I expressed my feelings." Charlotte felt tears threatening to form, not because of the attention, but because every word sounded painfully sincere. "I was wrong," he said, "and losing her taught me what truly matters." The square remained silent long after he finished. No one laughed, and no one mocked her. For the first time, Adrian had chosen her dignity over his pride. The realization touched a place in her heart she thought had closed forever. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and amber, Adrian found Charlotte standing beneath the same flowering tree where he had first seen her again. Neither spoke immediately. The moment felt too important for rushed words. Finally, Adrian stepped closer. "I love you," he said softly. The confession contained no hesitation, no fear, and no pride, only truth. "I should have said it years ago." Charlotte's eyes shimmered. "You hurt me deeply. I know. I wasn't sure I could ever trust you again." His expression tightened. "I understand." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she saw something she had never fully seen before. Not the powerful duke, not the proud nobleman, but simply a man who had learned from his mistakes and fought to correct them. He was a man willing to humble himself for love, a man who finally understood respect. Slowly she stepped closer. "I still love you too." Relief flooded his features. Not triumph, but relief. The difference mattered. "But if we try again," she continued, "it must be built on honesty. It will. And respect. Always. And no testing loyalty." His voice became firm. "Never again." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they carried healing instead of heartbreak. Adrian gently brushed them away. Then, with her permission reflected in her eyes, he pulled her into his arms. The embrace felt like coming home. Months later, wedding bells rang throughout the kingdom. Nobles traveled from distant regions to witness the ceremony. Yet the grand decorations mattered far less than the promises exchanged before family and friends. When Adrian introduced Charlotte as his Duchess, pride filled his voice, not pride in her title, but pride in the woman herself. As husband and wife, they stood together beneath a clear evening sky, hands intertwined. Both understood how close they had come to losing everything. Both understood the lesson their journey had taught. Love could survive hardship, and love could survive distance. But love without respect eventually breaks. Fortunately, theirs had been rebuilt stronger than before, and as they walked toward their future together, neither doubted they had finally found exactly where they belonged. If you were moved by Adrian and Charlotte's journey to rebuilding broken trust, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful love stories. Do you think true respect can truly be restored after a betrayal like Adrian's, or are some wounds too deep to fully heal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.